Hi, so a very warm welcome to the workshop. In this workshop, I'll be making you understand how to read Sekhar Bandyopadhyay. This is the most important book for modern history, for GS as well as history option. तो समझते हैं कैसे इसको पढ़ना चाहिए and whenever we study any topic, what kind of challenges you're going to face with respect to that. Alright, so let us start. So, first of all, this whole learning process is going to depend upon one, what is the importance of that topic. So that's why today I'm going to choose the topic Quit India Movement. Every second or third year UPSC is going to ask a question from there. Alright, that's why the importance of the topic should be known. We'll also see the PYQ also along with this. Alright, then understanding the historical event, what the event was all about, what were the circumstances in which this happened. So because at times UPSC can ask you a question about the circumstances which led to that specific event. Then what are the different types of reading, like आपने पार्लियामेंट में पढ़ा होगा कि 3 रीडिंग के पास में कोई भी बिल पास होता है, तो यहाँ पर भी हमें यही चीज देखनी है. In the first reading we should be very quick कि what are the different segments which are given in the book and from exam point of view which are more relevant for us. That's why after reading we have to extract the relevant points, and finally then only we should go towards note making. We should not go towards note making in the first reading itself, because many of the dubious things which are not important from exam point of view, and at times you will see in this topic structuring is not there in the book. Okay, I'll give you examples for that also. So stages of learning process, these are the 5 stages. Please try to understand them. On the basis of this I'm going to make you understand various things. The first part is previous year questions. Before reading the book, see the previous year questions. We have already uploaded this booklet multiple times कि modern India के सारे PYQ देख लो. See the topic. So the topic has been repetitive, and one thing which is very clear, same Gandhiji who withdrew non-cooperation on the issue of violence refused to condemn people violence during Quit India movement. Do you agree that he was losing faith in the efficacy of non-violence, that he was willing to deviate from this path? So it's a very difficult question, not easy to answer. Yes or no में answer हो नहीं सकता. There are multiple interpretation in between. You have to bring in some historians also in this one. Then the next 3 questions, you can easily think UPSC is asking one specific area. Can we call it a spontaneous revolution? Spontaneous revolution, spontaneous revolution. It means if you do PYQ in a very good manner, this is going to help you in the exam. Alright. And finally UPSC has asked a question with respect to the strategy of Gandhiji, that Gandhiji in 1939 did not start a movement. Okay, but what happened in 1942? And this is the comment of Sumit Sarkar, that in the summer of 1942 Gandhiji was in a strange and uniquely militant mood. Somebody who was a believer in mediation was now not going to go for mediation. He said do or die. We'll try to understand that perspective also. So we have been able to restrict ourselves that number 1, if I'll read Quit India topic, these are the most important area which I should think about. Then the second area which we'll talk about is what prominent question other than this can be formed from this book, from that specific 5-6 pages which are referring towards Quit India movement. So let me just make it easy for all of you कि whenever you read a book, क्या क्या चीजें आपको ध्यान रखनी है. Alright, so please consider this as the most important thing. Like if we are reading Quit India movement, the first thing which I'll look at it, I should at least cover the dimensions which are covered in PYQ, number 1. Second, which probable themes can come in the future, that should also be seen, that is number 2. Third, what kind of interactions can we specifically see in this theme, meaning linkages of Quit India with peasant movement, tribal movement, or what kind of interaction, interlinkages you can see. Like even this debate which they have asked, did he lose efficacy? So if there is any specific debates which are directly linked to that, we have to cover them also, which may not be covered in PYQs. Like here in PYQ they have already covered a debate, तो इसी के अंदर ही subsume हो जाएगा in part number 1. Alright, so please try to understand the process. If you follow this on multiple occasions, आपका part बन जाएगा, and then this will not only be important for your optional, this will become very important for your general studies also, how to read NCRTs. Let us try to understand. So whenever any historical event is there, there is going to be some background, some reasons are going to be there. Then what are the specific events which are directly linked with it? क्या हुआ When we say quit India movement, start from August of 1942 and goes all the way up to 1944. It was never called off. So what are those specific events which we can see? कहाँ पे parallel government बना? In which specific area? What was the regional spread? All this will become part of it. Then the overall outcome, what were the positive and negative? And one is the long-term legacy of this movement. Okay, like whenever any important event is going to happen, even in modern India, तो भी बार-बार हम quit India का नाम लेते हैं. That is the legacy. In which specific area can we see the legacy? Okay. Then what are the relevant things which you should highlight in your book? Important facts which are linked to this, like even the opening date. What was the opening date? On 8th of August, Gandhiji gave the speech. By 9th of August, by the early morning, all the Congress leadership, it was behind the bar. Important facts. Second, keywords. What are the specific keywords? Like one keyword you can see from PYQ, spontaneous revolution. Was it spontaneous or not? Important keyword which we can see. We'll see various keywords when we'll go for the reading also. Introduction and conclusion. Can we create some good introduction, conclusion for this specific topic? And finally, what kind of historiography trends are there on this topic? Historiography trend means what are the debates which you can find? Like on civil disobedience, there is a specific debate that what was the role of business community in this beginning and the end of the movement. Here it is more about why Gandhiji did not call off the movement, even though when there was lots of violence. That becomes a prominent historiography theme. And these things, if you are able to cover, exam के हिसाब से आपका अच्छा marks बन जाएगा. Let us try to see now reading the book itself. So please go for slow reading. Okay, इस वीडियो को थोड़ा सा और स्लो करके इसको पढ़ सकते हो. You can have book in your hand itself so that कि आप इसको समझ पाओ. Because I have already read this books I don't know how many times. When I was preparing also, when I started teaching also, this book remains the, you can say, cornerstone of my preparation as well as my teaching pedagogy. Let us start one by one. I'll make you understand कि भाई क्या क्या चीजें चल रही है. टॉपिक तो इन्होंने लिख दिया है. The topic is freedom with partition and 8.1 is quit India movement. Title डाल दिया शेखर बंदोपाध्याय में. But quit India movement will not start from here. First it will go into backgrounds and backgrounds and backgrounds. That's why when you start making notes of quit India movement, आप first page से notes बनाना start नहीं कर पाओगे. इसलिए first reading is about recognition. What is importance in this? Let us try to understand. The demise of the civil disobedience movement around 1934 resulted in serious dissension within the Congress in the same way as it has happened after the withdrawal of earlier non-cooperation campaign. There can be a direct question on this statement. It is focusing upon the failure of two erstwhile movements of Gandhiji. But as such, do you see any linkages with Quit India movement? No. इस statement का इससे कोई relation नहीं है. But this can be a statement. That's why when you're studying any book, तो जरूरी नहीं है जिस टॉपिक में लिखा हो उसके आसपास से ही क्वेश्चन उठेगा. नहीं, यहाँ पे इसके ऊपर शुरू हो सकता क्वेश्चन आ सकता है. So this can be a statement and you have to understand what happened in 1922, what happened in 1934, what kind of problems, challenges do we see. And here Sekhar Bandyopadhyay will talk more about the challenges after 1934. The first part has already been covered in the previous chapter. Let us see further. While Gandhiji temporarily withdrew from active politics, the socialists and other left, they created a party which is known as Congress Socialist Party. Question has come in prelims 2015 on Congress Socialist Party. What it's about its members, about its basic ideas. His sympathies for socialism notwithstanding, Nehru never formally joined this group. So Nehru, as all of you know, was very much linked to socialism. He used to say socialism is a part of the answer for the world problem as well as India's problem. So he had sympathy with them. But in the words of Sumit Sarkar, so Sumit Sarkar has specifically put a comment ranged from vague and mixed up radical nationalism to fairly firm advocacy of Marxian scientific socialism. So the ideology of Nehruji has been explained by Sumit Sarkar. So if any question comes on socialism, like a previous year question has come on socialism with respect to Jawaharlal Nehru, but that was in the context of post-independence. Once we were independent, what kind of economic policies were pursued by him? There in the introduction, you can write about this. Now हम टॉपिक तो पढ़ रहे हैं क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, बट ये सब कहाँ से आ रहा है? तो देखो बुक में ऐसा ही होता है. बुक इज नेवर गोइंग टू बी लाइक कि आपके नोट्स नहीं है वो बुक. ठीक है, नोट्स क्रिएट करने के लिए आपको मेहनत करनी पड़ती है. लाइक यू कैन इजीली सी इन द फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ इटसेल्फ पढ़ना शुरू किया था क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट और हम कहाँ पे वेवर्ड जा रहे हैं. एंड दिस इज what makes it difficult for this book. Then they are talking about CSP, which specific Congress Socialist Party. It gained strength in provinces like UP, was meant to operate from within the Congress. So these are important points from prelims point of view. Okay, मेंस में एक और क्वेश्चन आपका आ सकता है कि व्हाट वाज द रोल ऑफ द left wing in radicalizing the agenda of Indian National Congress. So there these points can be used. Okay, I'm making you understand the interlinkages between the themes, कहाँ पे ये points काम के हैं, because अगर क्विट इंडिया पे क्वेश्चन आता है तो ये सब लिखेंगे कोई सेंस नहीं बनता है वहाँ पे. Alright, first 5-6 pages it is going into these various issues, then a background would be created. Let us go further. However, soon the divide within the Congress centered on, that is the council entry and the office acceptance. As all of you can understand, initially when there was a drift after 1922, there was a fight between the who wanted to become part of the council and those who wanted to be against it, like the no changers, who were staunch followers of Gandhiji, like C. Rajgopalacharya as well as Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So वही चीज यहाँ पे फिर से होने वाली थी कि भाई 1935 Act has come, should we accept the election, should we become part of the office also, करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए, तो उसके ऊपर भी अलग अलग व्यू पॉइंट्स यहाँ पर है. तो इफ देयर इज एनी क्वेश्चन ऑन दैट टॉपिक कि हाउ द 1935 एक्ट आल्सो क्रिएटेड अ काइंड ऑफ रिफ्ट विद इन द कांग्रेस, तो ये पॉइंट आ जाएगा आपका वहां पे. सो आई एम जस्ट मेकिंग अंडरस्टैंड, दैट्स व्हाई इन द फर्स्ट रीडिंग यू कैन नॉट मेक नोट्स. आपको रिकॉग्नाइज करना पड़ेगा कि विद इन द थीम ऑफ क्विट इंडिया व्हाट ऑल हैज बीन गिवन बाय द ऑथर, एंड वी हैव टू एक्सट्रैक्ट ओनली द इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स फॉर दिस टॉपिक. अदरवाइज अगर आप ये सब आंसर में लिखोगे इट विल बी वेरी वेवर्ड. So that is talking about that somehow they were able to avoid the Lucknow Congress in 1936. So कोई rift नहीं हुआ है ना. Already in 1907 once significant rift happened between moderates and extremists. In 1922 they somehow came to a kind of compromise, and the same thing happened in 1936 also. Okay, so majority led by Rajendra Prasad and Vallabhbhai Patel with the blessings of Gandhiji came around to a view that we should participate in the elections. So उन्होंने election में participate करने का decision ले लिया. That is what is as direct action was not an option, means Congress was not having the immediate strength which they could have bear upon the British and get to the independence. That's why in 1935 as per the act they wanted to participate in the elections. Let us try to understand now. AICC meeting in Bombay decided in favor of contesting the election, but the decision to acceptance of offices, election तो जीत में participate करेंगे, but if they will accept the office or not, this will be decided later on. So this became the decision. Okay, thereafter AICC sanctioning offer accepted in March by overriding the objections of Nehru and CSP leaders. So many of the socialist leaders, they said we should participate in the election, we should show the British that the Congress is the most legitimate party in India, but we will not accept the offices. And what was the viewpoint of Nehru? So Nehru ji said that if we participate in the election, we'll be keeping the imperial structure functioning and thereby would be letting down the masses whose high spirit the Congress itself had once helped in boosting up. Means अगर आप उनके स्ट्रक्चर के अंडर काम करना शुरू कर दोगे तो इवेंचुअली पीपल विल बी लाइक यार तुम तो हमसे धोखाधड़ी कर रहे हो. दैट वाज द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ नेहरू जी. एंड व्हाट हैज बीन सेड बाय शेखर बंदोपाध्याय दैट दिस आइडिया ऑफ नेहरू जी वुड बिकम प्रॉफिटिक इन द फ्यूचर. व्हाई? Because in 1939 Congress is going to resign. And why? Because British will never accept Indians as having a kind of partnership in the administration. They will take unilateral decisions. So whatever work was done by this Congress in the next 2 years from 37 to 39, it was not going to amount to much in terms of outcome, because British were never ready to provide that kind of power to the Indians. The Congress won the election in 1937 by targeting newly enfranchised voters, which include sections of working class as well as peasantry, but the achievements of these ministries, then they have mentioned some achievements were not good enough with respect to even caste system or the untouchability, with respect to the reforms for the peasantry, with respect to temple movement, etc., etc. So they were let down in various departments. Then it specifically talks about this resulted in a perceptible anti-labor shift in Congress attitude and epitomized in the passage of the Bombay Trade Association Act. So the important thing is, once the Congress came to power in 1937 after these elections, it did not take those kinds of steps which were expected by the people of India. And this is also important thing. This is a topic which is mentioned in your syllabus. But वो अलग से कोई टॉपिक नहीं बनाया शेखर बंदोपाध्याय ने, उसने क्विट इंडिया के अंदर ही उसको पूरा फिनिश कर दिया है. So if a topic comes on the elections of 1937, what was this outcome, what were the failures of the Congress, आपको content यहीं से मिलने वाला है. This is why I always tell you कि whenever you study in the first one, just try to outline which specific area is going to be important from this whole book. Then it talks about the development of the peasant front, where the rising militancy before election was harnessed by the Congress to win, but later it found it difficult to rise to the expectation of the Kisan voters. So in this paragraph, what Sekhar Bandyopadhyay is saying, that initially Congress ने हर किसी को mobilize किया, they mobilized the peasant, they mobilized the workers, but जब काम करने का मौका मिला, when they were required to perform for these people, the Congress faltered. This is what they are trying to mention. Now, what the book is going towards, it is now going to focus upon Kisan Sabha movement. This is again a topic on which UPSC has asked PYQ. Even though हमने पढ़ना शुरू किया क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, but UPSC के जब पेपर में हम देते हैं, so these kinds of topics are also going to come. Alright, so शेखर बंदोपाध्याय पढ़ते हुए ड्रिफ्टिंग बहुत ज्यादा है, लिंकेजेस एकदम से आएंगे, फिर थोड़ा ड्रिफ्ट होंगे, फिर वापस आएंगे. अब किसान सभा मूवमेंट का एज सच डायरेक्ट लिंकेजेस आपको क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट से नहीं है, if we see the factors, but now the next 2-3 pages are going to be completely linked to Kisan Sabha movement. Let us see that also. So what he is saying, that Kisan Sabha movement started in Bihar under the leadership of Swami Shahajanand Saraswati in 1929, when they came up with Bihar Provincial Kisan Sabha in order to mobilize peasantry. So he became the main leader of this. Thereafter, initially, they want to promote class harmony. As all of you know, the philosophy of Gandhiji. Gandhiji believed in class cooperation. He was not in favor of class struggle, which was the idea of Karl Marx. So even though they had created this Kisan Sabha movement, so they also accepted, okay, we will go for class cooperation. But when it was revived in 1933, it came under the influence of socialists. So by 1935, it went for abolition of zamindari as one of its main aim and objective. We have started focusing on the Kisan Sabha movement. ना पढ़ना क्या शुरू किया था, बट क्या क्या चीज़ अंदर आ रही है चैप्टर्स की, अब आपको ये चीज़ समझनी पड़ेगी. तो बिफोर मेकिंग नोट्स फॉर क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, आपको समझ में आ जाएगी यार ये पेज जो है, इवन दो इट इज विद इन द हेडिंग ऑफ क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट, बट दिस इज नॉट डिवोटेड टू दिस स्पेसिफिक इवेंट. तो उसके लिए हमें वेट करना पड़ेगा. इन बिटवीन विच टॉपिक्स आर कवर्ड, अपनी एक माइक्रो लिस्टिंग आप क्रिएट कर सकते हो किसी भी चैप्टर के लिए फॉर शेखर बंदोपाध्याय. लाइक सपोज इफ वी सी दिस चैप्टर फ्रीडम विद पार्टीशन, so we can understand, ठीक है, on the first page they talked about the state of Congress, and then second page they talked about elections. आप page number mention कर सकते हो specifically from the book. Then they went towards the movement of peasants and specifically Kisan Sabha. So this will create better clarity for you. इवन हमने पढ़ना टॉपिक स्टार्ट करके और देखो क्या 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 किस तरफ हम ड्रिफ्ट हो रहे हैं, बट एनीवे व्हेन यू स्टडी आपको ओपन रखने पड़ेंगे थॉट्स कि भाई ठीक है चलो विल वेट, लेट अस सी हाउ ऑल दीस टॉपिक्स विल बी इंटीग्रेटेड इन द एंड. सो बाय दिस टाइम BPK's membership had risen to 33,000. So they are also trying to understand how these Kisan Sabha movements are gaining popularity in their regional areas. It is also important to remember that this movement sought to construct a broad front of the peasantry. मीन्स पीजेंट्री को एक तरीके से ऑर्गेनाइज मोबिलाइज करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. ऑल्दो द रिच ऑक्यूपेंसी टेनेंट्स प्रोवाइडेड विद द लीडरशिप, इट्स मेन सपोर्ट बेस वाज मोरली पार्टिसिपेशन फ्रॉम मिडिल एंड पुअर पीजेंट. दैट इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू हैपन. अराउंड द सेम टाइम किसान सभा मूवमेंट आल्सो गेन्ड करेंसी इन आंध्रा एरिया आल्सो अंडर द लीडरशिप ऑफ NG Ranga. रिमेंबर देयर नेम्स because sometimes such question comes in prelims. Okay, he organized a number of peasant marches in 1933-34 and under the stewardship of Alor Zamindari Rayat. They also went for various kinds of initiatives. तो यहाँ पे उन्होंने ये सब एक्सप्लेन किया. इसमें से कितना आप याद कर सकते हो वो आपके ऊपर है. लाइक दिस साउथ इंडियन फेडरेशन ऑफ पीजेंट्स एंड एग्रीकल्चरल लेबर, दिस वाज आस्क्ड एज वन ऑफ द ऑप्शन इन 2018 इन प्रीलिम्स. ओके, सो व्हेनेवर यू आर स्टडीइंग हिस्ट्री यू कैन नॉट फ्रेगमेंट इट कि नहीं आप सिर्फ ऑप्शनल के हिसाब से ये हो. हाँ, जब आपका ऑब्जेक्टिव ऐसा है, लाइक इफ यू सीइंग फ्रॉम ऑप्शनल पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, तो आपको इस टॉपिक को पूरा ही डाइसेक्ट करना पड़ेगा. एंड कितने फैक्ट्स याद करने हम इजीली इसमें से निकाल सकते हैं कि भाई ठीक है, वी कैन टॉक अबाउट BPK's and the leader Swami Shaja and Saraswati. Then we can say okay, it was NG Ranga who was operating from Andhra Pradesh. So this is how you can at least make a chart in your answers if a question comes on Kisan Sabha. Then they're talking about Odisha also, which specifically see establishment of Utkal Kisan Sangha in 1935. All these radical development led to the creation of All India Kisan Sabha at Lucknow session in Congress in 1936. So if a question comes on the evolutions of the Kisan Sabha, तो first आप regional लिखेंगे and then you say all India Kisan Sabha. तो पूरा जो ये 2 pages हैं, they are focusing upon the peasant issue, how they are becoming part of the Indian national politics. This is how it becomes important. Okay. Next, it specifically talks about what became the radical demands like abolition of zamindari, then income tax should be reduced, granting of occupancy rent, etc., etc. Okay, then they came under the influence of communists also with the 1935 Kuomintang decision to follow United Front strategy. That's why eventually, even the Facebook session which we see in December 1936, Congress also adopted its agrarian program for the first time. So we can see in 1920s and 1930s how the Kisan Sabha and then eventually its linkages with the Congress were very fruitful in terms of at least radicalizing the agenda, and that's how peasantry became a part of the Indian national movement. So these 2 pages are with respect to the Kisan Sabha. Then, as you can easily understand, the other issue with respect to the Indian National Congress from 1920-30s, one was with respect to the programs for peasant as well as the working class. The second was with respect to how to include the various states. As all of you understand, during the British time, there was a division. One was British India, the other was princely states. So what should be the policy of the Congress towards the princely states also had a kind of evolution. All of you know there were around 562 princely states at the time of independence. It became a very big challenge, and it was the, you can say, work of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel which became responsible for the integration of these princely states within the Indian Union. At least 532 of them joined us. So important thing for us is what was the policy of the Congress towards the rest of the states or the princely state is also discussed in this chapter, and we'll see it. यहाँ पे उन्होंने सिर्फ इसको इंट्रोड्यूस किया कि हाउ जवाहरलाल नेहरू, okay, he attended the 5th session of All India States People's Conference. इसको उन्होंने एड्रेस किया. Then comes the drift between the Congress, between the left and right was going to begin. Why? Because the left was always going for complete independence. It has already been taken as one of the program, or one of the, you can say, decision was taken in 1929 itself, and by 26th of Jan 1930 Independence Day was also celebrated. So it had become a part of the politics of the Congress, but to what extent the right and the left are going to go directly in towards that was going to be the main issue between these two fronts. So some of them, like the Rajendra Prasad, they wanted to committed Gandhians and believed in constructive programs, while the left, they wanted independence. So though both of them wanted independence, but the process, objectives, those are going to differ specifically. Then next part talks about again these ministry, that ministry came in 8 provinces. So all of us need to understand how many provinces were there. So around 11 provinces were there, and out of that, in 8, the Congress was able to get their ministry in July 1937. Okay, then while the ministry formation raised great expectation, brought it greater militancy among the peasantry, it also brought right-wingers back to power, and they tried to retrieve the Congress from the clutches of socialists. So the game of socialist versus the right, it has already begun within the Congress in this 1930s, and this became the defining decade for us. So next, it will talk about how from 1938-39, under the leadership of Kisan Sabha, the issue will be with respect to the Bakshat land. Bakshat lands were the land which were having permanent tenancy, means unko customary rights diye hue the, you can enjoy tenancy for long terms, but this was being changed by many of the zamindar or the landlords. That's why militancy started over this area, and this became very prominent in Gaya district, Chhapra also. In these areas it became very prominent, but one historian, Stephen Hanningham, specifically mentioned that this movement was more of a reformist movement rather than a movement which was for revolution as such. So this is, you can easily understand, the Bihar Congress tried to distance itself from the Kisan Sabha. So if a question comes from Kisan Sabha, its relations with Congress, so because of the violence which was now becoming prominent in Bihar area, Congress started distancing itself from the Kisan Sabha, and even its members were not allowed to become a part of it. In UP also, Kisan Sabha activities were disillusioned with the ministry. So if a question comes on the performance of the Congress ministry during the 2 years roughly, in 28 months for which they ruled, these provinces, what was the report card. So ये सारा उसी के बारे में बात चल रहा है, how the peasant cause was not taken to that level. Then second part talks about territory dilemma was over the princely states. So with respect to princely states, there was a dilemma within Congress. Should we directly support the people of these areas so that they can also start their parallel movements and become part of India later on? So what was the throughout 1920s, 30s, the Congress chose not to intervene. So first part of the policy was we were not going to intervene, but this policy is going to change later on. Why? Because first of all, we see creation of All India States People Congress in 1927, means they will form an association. Then many of the left wingers like Bose, Nehru, they wanted the desirability of greater intervention in the princely states, because right wingers उसकी तरफ नहीं जा रहे थे, because they said we should focus only on British India, but Bose and Nehru said no, we should focus on whole of India. So this became the major agenda, or the, you can say, radicalization of the agenda by the left wing. And here comes a comment from Ian Copeland, who say right winger now was surmised began to dream of power at the proposed federal center, and for that they required the princes to nominate the representatives from among the people close to the Praja Mandals. 1935 Act came up with the proposition of federation, and the creation of the federation itself is going to become a very big issue. Okay, and that is what is being explained here. And as all of you know, in the Harihara censor and the Tripuri session 1938-1939, the rift is going to come within the Congress. First over the issue of federation, second over the issue of the presidentship. And Subhash Chandra Bose, against the wish of Gandhiji, is going to contest, and he is going to defeat Pattabi Sita Ramaiah. And this is going to create a rift within the Congress at this point of time. Alright, so all this is explained about these Praja Mandals. वो आप पढ़ सकते हो, because the main objective with which we started the reading session, it was for understanding of Quit India movement. But I'm just making you understand what all has been discussed in this part, like Haripura Congress session and even the Tripuri Congress session in March the following year. It centered on the re-election and the issue of federation versus anti-federation, and eventually the policy towards the various India All India People's State Conference. तो उसके ऊपर ये पूरा इन्होंने issue समझाया हुआ है. And even here you can remember the quote that even though Subhash Chandra Bose, he was expelled from the Congress, but see the opinion of Gandhiji. Gandhiji has written to C.F. Andrews that Subhash Chandra Bose is my son, but a spoiled child of the family who need to be taught a lesson for his own good. So he was suspended from the executive post for 3 years specifically. But this is the opinion of Gandhiji. Such opinions becomes important. Like in general studies in 2016, UPSC asked the question, what was the difference in the approach of Subhash Chandra Bose and Gandhiji with respect to India's independence struggle? So there in conclusion, you can use such kinds of statements कि भाई ठीक है, there was a rift which we could easily see from the events, but it does not mean that they were going apart completely. This is something which you have to understand. Now, if we see the background of the Quit India movement, the background will be formed from here onwards. The outbreak of Second World War brought in new variables in Indian politics. So from 1939, once the we can easily see that from 1939 onwards, Congress is going to resign. Once Congress is going to resign, a specific policy will be followed by Muslim League, a specific policy will be followed by the British, some offers will be put forward, and what is going to happen, that is something which we need to understand. In general studies, UPSC asked the question once, okay, that what was the impact of World War on India's national struggle? So in First World War, we can easily understand, okay, we see the coming of the Ghadar movement. Okay, we also see that repression and suppression eventually led to the rise of a movement by the end of the First World War. The whole Khilafat issue, it was directly linked to the First World War, because Treaty of Sevres was imposed upon the Ottoman Empire, which led to the rise of Khilafat movement. So the impact of First World War on India's national movement, the impact of Second World War on India's national movement, these two themes are independent themes of the Quit India movement. But such kinds of question can also come. So when you are studying, be very conscious about everything. Here we'll see the background. Let us see what are those new variables it is talking about. Number one, the war brought changes in the British policy and changes in Congress strategy also. Means both British and the Congress are going to change. Let us see how. So let's go. Associated India with England's declaration of war on Germany without consulting any Indian opinion. So what we can realize कि हमारी इज्जत तो आज भी नहीं हो रही है. ठीक है. The Congress Working Committee made it clear that it was going to support war efforts only if two conditions were set. First, there should be a pledge of independence, we should become independent after the war, and second, we should be made part of the committee which is going to look after the war effort or creation of national government at the center. But since all of them, they were not acceptable to the Lord Lincoln, so on 14th of October, eventually this was announced, and by 30th of October, we see resignation of the various Congress ministries. So what we can understand from this, that this is going to bring new variable. The first variable was Congress is now out of power. It is again dissatisfied with the policy of the British. But rather than being supported by the other political party, we have to see how the Muslim League is going to celebrate the Day of Deliverance. Even Ambedkar ji, he is going to support them, and home government thought of capitalizing on this rift. The British thought, again we can see the rift between these two mainstream political parties. Now let us use this to prolong their rule in India. These are the new variables which you can easily see with the coming of the Second World War. Then in this part, they're going to discuss how Linlithgow is going to come up with the August offer, which will have these various provisions like post-war constitutional consultative body, expansion of the Viceroy's executive council, etc., etc. But this was not going to be of any favor to the Indians. That's why it was rejected. But by 1941, we see the coming of the Japan. Japan was able to conquer Borneo, Manila, Singapore, Java, Rangoon, Sumatra, Andaman, Nicobar, and they had even bombed Colombo. So what we could easily understand, the expansion of the Japanese in the 1941 was going to create unease within Congress. It's going to create unease within Gandhiji. So that's why eventually, to satisfy some of the aspirations of the Indians, Winston Churchill was forced by two leaders, Franklin Roosevelt as well as Chiang Kai-shek, who was the ruler in China, that you should come up with some solution for the Indians. So that's why they sent the Cripps mission. Again, the Cripps mission, the problem was they were not giving anything immediately. It was again a post-dated check. After the World War, 4-5 चीजें आपको ये provide करेंगे. That was not suitable. So all these things were going to happen. All right. So eventually, by the end of 1941, the restive things have already happened, and by the middle of 1942, see, a statement which has come in your question paper. In 1940, there was a remarkable change in Gandhi's attitude, and he seemed to be in an unusually militant mood. Same question has come. So we can identify PYQs being asked from here itself. Okay, so इस चीज को पकड़ना आपको सीखना पड़ेगा. Whenever you're reading, that's why you have to first see the PYQ, ताकि कभी किसी का मॉडल आंसर भी आपने अपने लेवल पे डेवलप करना हो. It can be created, but how will you create it without even knowing about it? So it will be only through reading. So we can understand, okay, so what was this militant mood? अब हम इसको underline कर लेंगे, because this is going to become important for us. This is going to become the explanation of that specific thing. Okay, so as the possibility of a Japanese invasion became real, Gandhi refused to accept that Japanese could be the liberator and believed that India in the hands of Indian was the best guarantee against the fascist aggression. Why Gandhiji came into this militant mood? The reason was Japanese were approaching, number one. Second, the war and its obvious impact on the economy and social life of Indian, many of whom had reached the threshold of their tolerance and were ready for final showdown with the British imperialism. Gandhiji was someone who had a very good understanding of the masses, and since he was having very good understanding of the masses, he could easily use that for the sake of Indian nation itself. So that channelization of the energy of the masses was the main bulwark which we can see of Gandhiji. So these were the reason why he was in this stage. Even though the events are going to be explained later on, the approach of Gandhiji and what were the immediate factors for his militant mood are explained in this paragraph. And when you write answer for that PYQ, you have to use it. ठीक है, देखो आंसर आपको कभी भी बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड ऐसे नहीं मिलने वाले, बट कीप ऑल द PYQ इन फ्रंट ऑफ यू, रीड, मार्क कर लो कि दिस PYQ नंबर दिस कैन बी आंसर्ड फ्रॉम हियर. और जब नोट्स बनाओगे तो भी आपको ऐसे सेगमेंटेड ही आपको कंटेंट मिलने वाला है. इट्स नेवर गोइंग टू बी कि एक पेज से सब कुछ आपको आराम से मिल जाएगा. ऐसा मिल जाएगा तो बहुत अच्छा है, कुछ क्वेश्चन में मिल भी जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं कि नहीं मिलेगा, बट इन एवरी टॉपिक नो. Then they have talked about specifically the economic impact of the war was initially beneficial to some of the groups of India. Why? Because commodity rates were increasing, but India as such was not affected by those. So when the commodity price rose, it benefited industrialists, merchant and rich peasant producing for the market. But later on, various kinds of bad effects also came, and this came from 1942. Now see the keyword, and from one of the Max Harcourt has described a scarcity crisis. Why was there was scarcity crisis? You can see the Russia-Ukraine war, which is going on right now, and how it creates scarcity of wheat, vegetables, etc. सेम थिंग. तो अभी भी जब लगे ना समझ नहीं आ रहा तो प्रेजेंट के हिसाब से पास्ट को देखना शुरू करो. ठीक है. बिटवीन अप्रैल एंड अगस्त द प्राइस इंडेक्स ऑफ द फूड ग्रेन it had increased by 64 points in North India. So this is a very good facts. When you have to show how there was inflation, this point should come there, inflation. Okay. Then second, you have to talk about that dislocation of the supply of Burmese rice. That is very important. Then the third point, which is very important, a very harsh denial policy was started by the British. So what kept on happening? The British thought Japanese are going to come, so we should deliberately destroy all the infrastructure of the eastern coast so that Japanese cannot use it for fighting against the British. This became the part of the denial policy. It led to mayhem in Bengal. Okay, in fact, there is a very important event which all of you should know, that Winston Churchill was made apprised of the situation in India, and he was told millions of people are dying in Bengal because of the famine kind situation. So you will be amazed to know what was the reply of Winston Churchill. He said, "Only tell me if Gandhi is alive or dead, because if there is a famine, he should also die." So this is how inhuman they were. So this whole policy of British was going to create a lot of problem in India, and this was being seen by Gandhiji. It was witnessed by him what was happening in India during the wartime. So by 1942, the tolerance limit of the Indians had already gone, and a leader was required who could channelize it. Gandhiji was not slow to feel this popular mood of militancy and realized that the moment of the final engagement with the Raj had arrived. Leave India to God, wrote in May 1942. If that is too much, then leave her to anarchy. So you can see by this time Gandhiji himself came under the influence of socialism. He was now not speaking in the earlier kind of voice, which used to be like, let's go for the compromise, because he had seen everything. He tried from last 20 years, he was asking British for some kind of concession which can create self-government in India, but that was not happening. India was at the receiving end of the war, even though it was not its own issue which they were fighting all the time. Alright, so it was this which created the circumstances for the Quit India movement. Please try to understand. Whenever you start reading, एक बारी में आंसर नहीं मिलने वाला भाई आप. बहुत सारे, अब जैसे हमने अभी तक इतना पार्ट पढ़ लिया है, ठीक है. We have roughly done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pages roughly we have covered. 12 pages हमने cover कर लिया, and still we have not reached the core of Quit India movement. Okay, the core is not there. We are only outlining the circumstances. In between, which other topics we were able to do? We were able to cover Congress election, Kisan Sabha movement. Then third, even the Congress policy towards the princely state. This is before independence. Please try to understand. Okay. Fourth, which we were able to understand in this point of view, how the war from 1939 was going to bring in new variation. This can be a probable question, like I have talked about in the beginning itself. And whenever we are studying, we have to see the probable themes. So I have made you understand these probable themes of Kisan Sabha, probable themes with respect to the elections of Congress and how they faltered in various departments. Then even their approach towards princely state, and this can be a very important theme. How the beginning of the Second World War brought in new variable in India's politics, and that's how you have to see it. Economics, we are talking about the background. We are seeing August-Offer, Cripps mission. We have also discussed a little bit about the economic situation, which facts are more important than others. In between, we have seen one or two historians who have used specific keywords, like scarcity crisis, which has happened by the middle of 1942. It's a very good keyword, which you have to remember. All right. So all these things are very important when you're reading. You have to be very patient. You have to be very patient, and if you're patient enough, तो आप एक बार जब reading करते जाओगे, by the end of first reading, you'll know exactly on what page, what are the useful points, what are the multiple themes, and for doing so, I would request all of you. So whenever you're specifically reading from the book, आप अपनी खुद की एक टॉपिक लिस्टिंग कर लीजिए. You can just go for creation of an index, because the index of the Sekhar Bandyopadhyay, it is not comprehensive. It just covered the basic. 3-4 पार्ट में पूरे चैप्टर को डिवाइड किया. That is no how you should do it. You should see the syllabus of UPSC and divide it accordingly as per yourself. तो आप इंडेक्स बनाइए, साथ साथ में ये चीज़ आपको नोट डाउन करते रहनी है along with the pages, because if you're able to do, not going to do this in the first reading, second reading में भी कुछ outcome नहीं आने वाला, ठीक है. So this is the first part of the reading. In the second part, topic तो यही same रहेगा, will continue from here itself, कि how Gandhiji is going to use this in the second part. Okay, so in the first video I'm going to discuss about this much only, and as I've told you, हमें आधे घंटे से ज़्यादा हो चुका है, and we are discussing the same things, but अभी तक क्विट इंडिया तक पहुँच भी नहीं पाए. So when you're reading a chapter of this शेखर बंदोपाध्याय, एक चीज़ हमेशा ध्यान में रखना, पेशेंट रहना पड़ेगा, because it's not easy. And whenever we start reading, it's very fragmented, very segmented in nature. ऐसे नहीं है कि चैप्टर वाइज अलग अलग करके उसने सिलेबस के हिसाब से आपकी बुक बनाई है. नो, book was created, then UPSC is now using it for your modern India. So it's the other way around, which we have to understand. Alright, so that's it for the first part, and the second part will start from here and we go the distance. We're finished till it is the end of the Quit India movement. So all the very best from my side.